As we get older, when is it that we get slower? Because our body doesn't recover in the way it used to. More aggressive sessions could injure us, but should we expect to slow down anytime soon? What age does it actually happen? Up step Dan Nash and Simon Smith, aka the Brummie Runner. Dan is a 2:12 marathon runner, a coach, and he has a PhD in exercise physiology. And you probably have seen him pacing Philly to her awesome PB in Berlin last year. Simon is a 45-year-old Army veteran, 6-star marathon finisher, and just ran a 2:35 PB in Berlin when many fell apart, and he believes he can still get much faster. And Dan coaches Simon. I just had to speak to them both about the methods they used to ensure Simon actually keeps getting faster as he gets older, and you're going to want to hear this. But before I chatted with them, I went for a run to process my thoughts about mine and Mary's training methods, what we do and what we can learn.
So ahead of our chat with Dan and Simon, I've decided to take Mary up the hill to actually a really wonderful kind of running area that I want to show you as well, and share our thoughts on coaching in general and what we do when we train for marathons in terms of the setup to try and keep ourselves uninjured. Because there's one thing I would say about speaking to other coaches is you've always got to be open to new approaches and new learning, and I think we're all of that same mindset. So that's what's exciting about this chat. Let's walk from here. Yeah?
Yeah.
Considering I nearly passed out at the top. So we've just got through what I would deem a pretty successful marathon training block. Just not a great outcome in Berlin for various reasons. But our training, I think we got pretty bang on, particularly Mary's. And you have to remember we were in our mid-40s, so our main philosophy is train for life.
Mid to late. Mid to middle.
Mid to middly 40s. Here we are, check this out, right? That's the view over there to the sea. Now this little hidden gem in here, wait for it. So that is the windmill I got to last week. This is a 400-meter running track at the top of the hill that overlooks the sea. You can't quite see the sea over there, but that's pretty amazing, right? I mean, it's a dirt track, so we really feel like maybe we could be in E10 or something, but we could come here to do threshold repeats potentially sometimes, yeah. Like a hill warm-up.
Yeah, and it's like 5k from our house, so nice warm-up run here.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Which leads us on, I guess, to how our training looks. But are we going to do one lap around this track?
Yeah.
So the way we both train is that we have an approach to the week where we have essentially two spicier sessions, but they're not super spicy. We have one of them we would call tempo, which you might call about 6 or 7 out of 10, low to middle of zone 3. And one of them, we call them the lactate threshold sessions, usually 800s, kilometre repeats, 1200s, and that's at the top of zone 3 and low zone 4, both designed to push our lactate threshold upwards or pull it up from above, but nothing like you would think, oh my God, that's unachievable, that's too fast. While Mary's taking a video of that, you know, I've been there, seen it, done it, mate. Generally, Mary got to around, if you work in miles, A, why you're a psychopath, but B, she got to around 100 kilometers in a week, 60 miles, 66 miles. By the end, I was getting to about probably in the region of 50 miles on my top weeks and supplementing that with cycling. But it was majoritively easy work. That's what we found. But those 2 sessions, below and just above lactate threshold, absolutely wonderful for our speed. The only problem we have, I think, and I'm interested to hear Dan's thoughts on this, is we train in extreme heat and humidity. You know, it is regularly over 30 here, humidity of 80-90%. So I wonder whether that makes a difference on how we train, or how we at least perceive our training. So the week looks like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. That was Mary blowing her nose. Mary would do, by the end, double runs on Tuesday and Thursday. Easy in the morning, threshold in the afternoon Tuesday, and on Thursday, easy in the morning, tempo or marathon pace in the afternoon. You know, it is a pretty simple structure, 7 runs. Mine was 4 days a week. I just didn't have that middle Wednesday, I did cycling instead. So this for me is the golden question. How much volume does Simon do, and how much percentage of that volume is what we would class as anything above easy. That's going to be the interesting find, I think.
Yeah.
And what is above easy? Like, I guess is another question. I've got so many questions. All right, we've got to get home before it gets dark because the lights are going out pretty quick. But I'm excited to talk to Dan and Simon tomorrow and find out just how differently they make themselves faster to us.
So Simon and Dan, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. Simon, we'll start with you first because, of course, whilst 95% of us blew up in a spectacular way at Berlin, you ran a pretty epic 2:35 PB in that heat. Just talk us through, what did you do that got you to a 2:35 in that heat, and that might be perceived as a slightly different training method?
Over the years, I've done lots of marathons. I've sort of messed around with the training, really. And it got to a point when I thought, I'm 45 years old now, but there's got to be something more than doing what I've been doing, because I'm eking off seconds, or sometimes I go slower, sometimes I go 30 seconds faster. So Dan and I, or Dan should I say, put together a 14-week block of training. Was I skeptical at first? I think anyone who looks at a training program that doesn't contain any old school 400 meter repeats, blow your lungs apart, go as hard as you can, as fast as you can, no hill repeats, is going to be skeptical. And I wasn't skeptical of Dan, far from it. I was just skeptical of, will this method work? Because I hadn't heard of anybody else using it before.
So Simon, I'd never met or heard anything of Simon until he arrived at my lab one day. I hadn't come across his fantastic Instagram account. I can tell he's already very motivated, very driven, and I already know within about 5 minutes that I'm going to have to be coaching him for the next 14 weeks. I've got no option in this. Simon is...
Now, in this part of the video, Dan talked about the 3 determining factors of marathon performance as he sees it and how most people see it, let's be honest, and that's VO2 max, economy, and threshold. And I have a really good visual way of explaining this concept. Think of your marathon training like a house. The ground floor is your aerobic base, and that is created with easy running. And the bigger the ground floor, the stronger your house. The second floor is your threshold, and the ceiling determines how fast you can run at a given pace. In this case, marathon pace. And the roof of your house is the VO2 max, as in how much oxygen the body can take in and use. And this is built by hard sessions of short interval distances. And people often think to get faster over marathon pace, you have to run significantly faster in training. But the way we train, and what Dan is suggesting, is rather than raise the roof with hard and sometimes dangerous work, why not try instead to make that second floor ceiling nearer to the roof? That is to say, why not try to push our lactate threshold from 80% of VO2 max to 90% as an example, with sessions nowhere near as aggressive as VO2 max, but every bit as effective, if not more. And for older or injury-prone runners, this has to be an effective method. Build a big ground floor, a high second floor ceiling, not a bigger roof.
So that's sort of governed the philosophy and the training approach to Simon. Was you don't need to be able to run any faster over 5, 6, 10, 15 minutes. What we need to do is improve your durability with thresholds. For Simon, it was just about building the easy mileage up, and when he's doing his harder sessions, keeping them controlled between like the first and second threshold. So Simon obviously needed a little bit more miles. That's a pretty safe bet in that it's going to be effective. At the same time, we didn't want to injure Simon, and he's had a lot of success at running a max of 50 miles a week, but we wanted to try and push that. And then in the initial first half of the block, so the first 6 or 7 weeks, we had a pretty similar structure of twice a week we're doing a threshold based session. And then easy long run on the Sunday, but keep him at just the same pace as you normally every other run of a week, just quite a comfortable intensity, just about building volume. So that was the first half of the block. And then we transitioned to a more marathon specific focus, where we effectively dropped the easy long run, and we either did some sort of progressive long run where you're getting up towards marathon intensity by the end, or it would be a fartlek session where Simon would do chunks of time at marathon effort, marathon heart rate, with some more steady recoveries in between. Yeah. With the idea is we've built the capacity to tolerate a long run, but we need to now make it more specific to the marathon.
Okay, the chat isn't actually finished. There's still more to come, and it's the next day, and I'm going on a run. But I felt like I needed the time overnight to process my thoughts and be able to like highlight the things that I think are really important for any of us that are worried about slowing down, middle-aged, or you know, wanting to get faster. What are some of the important things that I can take from this chat? And I guess the first thing was that I was really interested in, and I think it's something that affects a lot of us, is how do you control your efforts? How do you kind of manage that? So I think we all have an inclination to push maybe a little bit harder than we should. How does that get controlled? I wondered if Simon had any insight into that.
If I went out and Dan said to me, I want you to go out and do 5 minutes at threshold, and someone said to me, what does that feel like? It gets to the point where I'd be going, I could push harder now. But if I pushed harder now, if it was a 10K race, it'd be like the last 1K. When you're starting to go, right, the heart rate's going up, you're starting to breathe a bit more, and you feel like you're putting a kick in, bring it back one from that. That's where I was. And I'm a bit more in control. And if you ask me a question now, I could give you a 5 or 10 word answer.
LT2, about second threshold, that pace you can sustain for about an hour, is a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
So when I'm giving training to people who haven't had lab testing, which is probably about half of the people I'm coaching, I'm going 6 or 7 out of 10. That's fine, that's plenty.
So it's learning about feel and also having a faith in the process. I think it's like knowing you could push harder, but not. So I wondered, really, what does Dan's training look like if Simon's looks like this?
My training looks very similar to what Simon was doing. The scale is just different. So
Okay.
I'm doing upwards of 200 kilometers a week, 125 miles a week. And my threshold sessions are bigger. A lot of the specific stuff was quite similar to what Simon was doing. For me, I've got very similar profile to Simon, but actually it's the thresholds which have the most room to play with. And that is true for 90% of people. And you're much less likely to get injured if you're doing quite controlled intensity sessions.
So given Simon's fantastic performance in just 14 weeks of training, where does he see his limit being? Does he still think he can get faster? I mean, is there hope for all of us as we get older?
It's a great question, and I keep Dan's smiling because I've badgered Dan about this already. I felt I was in 232 shape. I genuinely believe, picked the right day and I felt good and got my food right, I'd have gone and done that. I've got no danger about that. I suppose everyone says is the ultimate then would be, well, the next logical step would be go do 229. So it'd be interesting to hear from Dan, would I, even if I'd have got the 232, I've got 235, is there still room for development?
My reply to Simon when he asked me this pretty much straight after Berlin was, there's only so much progress you can make in 14 weeks. And actually, if Simon went and just took 2 weeks rest, did exactly the same again without doing anything differently, not doing any more volume, not doing any more intensity, I would be 95% confident that he would run faster again and would be fitter again. The key predictor of how fast I run is how much training I've done, not in the last 6 weeks, but in the last year.
Yeah, well, there you go. There you go, Simon. There's your answer from Dan.
No, he didn't. See, he hasn't answered it though, has he? He won't say a time though, will he? I've had this for
You could go sub 230, Simon. You could go sub 230. You could do it. You could go sub 230.
Well, we've got that. Got that on video. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I've got to stop to do this bit. That chat, it was so encouraging for 2 reasons, really. It was encouraging because I really had belief I can still get faster over the marathon distance and quite a lot of distances, but also that we follow the same training and coaching methods, which again, if someone that has a PhD and can run a 2:12 marathon follows, it's encouraging for us that we're going in the right direction. But I've managed to draw what I think is 2 conclusions to this chat. And the first conclusion is that consistency of approach, that's going to be the thing that makes the difference. It's not going to be a frilly session. It's going to be finding sessions that you can repeat. You can run today so you can run tomorrow and keep yourself in the game. And that ultimately is going to slow the decline, because inevitably there is an actual decline in physiological markers that might make you slower. but consistency over a lifetime is going to really slow that, and actually sometimes appear like it makes you faster depending on when you started running. Because that's the second conclusion. Slowing down in of itself is a really poor concept, because it depends on when you started. If I ran a marathon and trained like I train now when I was in my mid to early 20s, I probably would have done it faster, just because physiologically I could. But I didn't. I ran my first marathon at 39, and I still believe at 46 I've got a lot more in me and I can get a lot faster. Like Mary's 47 and I still believe she's got way faster in her. So relax about the concept of slowing down, because all that is a concept. If you start running at 50, then theoretically you could run faster marathons for another 10 years, depending on your starting point. So train sensibly, train consistently, train with purpose, get faster, or at the very least, don't get much slower. Oh, and if you enjoyed this video, then you should definitely consider subscribing to the channel, because you're going to learn a bunch more. And you're also going to love this video, which was where I interviewed Matt Fitzgerald, one of my favourite authors. I'll be honest, I couldn't even believe that he agreed to speak to me, but it's on the 5 core diet principles for the best endurance runners worldwide. I think you're really going to get a lot of value out of that one as well. Right, Cape Town, next Sunday, the marathon, it's on. See you there.